All right, all I'm doing now is creating a few frames to set to reset, to fade the vomit and reset to my first frame, which actually isn't the cat. My first frame is empty because I fade the cat in at the beginning. So I'm on my 26th frame here, from this to this, and eventually I want to get to this. So there's another way I can do this if you understand how compositing works, right? And layer management. Instead of going through and saving this at all the different settings, I can simply do it on the stage as well. Do what's called animating on the stage. But I'll just demonstrate that just so you can see, as long as you're figuring out the problem, you can do it different ways. So now just because I'm fading between this one and this one, I can do it all as I output my JPEGs as my frames. And I can just create extra frames that actually have 2 frames open. And then I can just change the opacity here, because this is a simple crossfade. So I'm going to do that instead of building them all in assets and then making them all 100% opacity layers here to fade out. So let me show you the final step, which you will see written down. Not written down, but shown in the instructions, that we're going to use easygif.com maker to animate our keyframes together. So now we've built all our keyframes, but we're going to need to output them as individual JPEGs. So I'm going to open this link in a new tab, have this over here, and now what I'm going to do is start at my first layer, turn all the other layers off. This is on my stage. I can save my assets and then close it. I don't need my assets anymore. That's just how I built my frames. And Mike, because you're doing it in Photoshop, you don't need to do this. This is the freeware thing. Because I want to make sure they haven't changed it. Yeah, there is no animation tool within Photopea. And there probably isn't going to be. So instead, we save each frame as its own separate JPEG, and that will go to downloads. So I'm going to open up my downloads folder, and I'm going to move it off to the side here, just so I can see it change. And I have it set so that everything in downloads is arranged by the date it was added. All right, so I'm going to download this first. I just say File, Export as a JPEG, because we're filling the square. Should be 1200 pixels by 1200 pixels. That is 8 inches by 8 inches by 100 pixels per inch. When I hit save, I'm going to make the quality always 100%, because why not? Right? But all of these are going to be 8 by 8 inches by 100 pixels per inch. It's going to go into my downloads. There it is. My next one, I just turn on the next layer. And I say File, Export as JPEG, Save. It's going to remember my settings 100%. You see it's there. So I have number 0, and then the next one is 1. So like frame 0, frame 1. Next layer, File, Export as JPEG, Save. It's going to keep adding a number to it. So that's 1, that's 2. I'm not going to rename it 0, because then it's going to do the next one without the 0. Go to 3, and I just have to go through for all my frames. This is the annoying part of using freeware. But it shows you can do everything with it. And you'll see that it looks kind of like a film strip. Except this is the first frame, and then it goes this way. You don't even need to select the layer, you just have to have it fully visible. And you can go pretty fast once you're used to it. Now I'm up to layer 9. Remember, I have more layers in my stage than I have frames in my sketch, right? And this is going to help us make our refined storyboard too. Outputting each of these. They're like pages of a flip book. And this is outlined in that mentorship presentation too. You save them all as a JPEG. It's like cutting your individual pieces of the film out. And the reason you're working on your own projects while I demo is because it's not fun to watch someone just save files. So because it's always the same file name, right here, it knows as a JPEG when it's saving it to downloads. This is just a programming thing in Photopea, and Photoshop does this too, that it won't overwrite the same file. So it will add that number automatically as a different version of the file. Okay, we'll check. Are you exporting it as a JPEG or saving it as a Photoshop?
Exporting it as a JPEG.
Okay, I'll check. All right, some things to keep in mind. So in my downloads folder, I've got this string of them, right? And it's just like looking at a film strip, but you've got to keep them in downloads until you've got all of them there so that it keeps numbering them for you and putting them in order. The first one will be out of order because it won't have a number, but then your second one will be number 1, your third one number 2, your fourth one number 3. So they're always one behind. So I'm on number 19, or I'm on number 20, right? And now this will be 21. There's 21. Even though it's layer 23, so frames are different than layers. Export as JPEG. Save. Just let it go to downloads. File, export as JPEG. Save. And file, export as JPEG. Almost done. Save. Now this is where you can start what's called animating on the stage. I'm going to do a really quick transition from this to this. And I'm going to do it with the JPEG I saved, simply by changing my blending mode on this layer. So I can try soft light, hard light, and I can always just duplicate it. Command J. And see how that looks. So I'm building a frame in between. So there's this, and then this. Come on, keep up with me. And I like that. See how the eyes are kind of red and it's crossed over? That's just using a blending mode of hard light. You could try vivid light, don't like it as much. Linear light, almost like it as much, but I like hard light. There we go. So now, even though this is a weird blending mode that's showing the layers underneath, I'm going to save this as the next JPEG. So export as a JPEG. Save. And then I can see it in my film strip. It now goes from this to this. And now I can go to 100% opacity with this one. And again, say File, Export, JPEG. Save. So that's frame number 26. Now I'm going to start fading it out. So I go to my next one. Come on. And I'm going to turn off all these other layers, because I'm going to make JPEGs that transition between my last layer and my first layer. And I could do this a little bit faster by just putting them all in a group and then turning off the group, but this helps you understand it. So now I want to save this frame, because it's a little different than the frame before. Starting to fade out. It's at 100% opacity. So File, Export as JPEG. And then there it is, right? And now I'm going to start creating new ones by just lessening the opacity here. First, I'll take it down to 80%. And then I'll say File, Export as JPEG. And what is it revealing underneath? It's revealing the background at 100%, right? Next, take it down 60%. And let's take it down by 20 percentage points each time. And then File, Export as JPEG. Take it down another 20 to 40% opacity on top of that background. Doesn't need to be exact. Then File, Export as JPEG. And you can see it in your film strip here in Downloads. It's starting to fade out. Okay. Eventually I'll get here to my start. 20%. This is called a fade. Come on, stick with me. You're doing so well, Photopea. Export as JPEG. Nice, and then there's going to be just one more to slow it down a little bit. I'll go to 10%. It's like barely there at all. And then File, Export as JPEG. But I can do as many steps as I want to like slow that transition down. All right, so now we see the animation. Just like that. Now, I can duplicate it, the first frame, and now I can give it a different name. And I'm going to make it, I'm going to see if this works in terms of alphabetical. Parentheses, 0, parentheses. And then if I go back to the very beginning, there it is. So there's my first frame, second frame, third frame, fourth frame, just like a film strip. Just frame by frame animation. And then I have it end on the same frame it started. So that will be a little bit longer if everything is synced at the same timing. Then that works. All right. Whew, that's a lot. So it's all in Downloads. Now what I want to do is go to my assignment 3. I already did test frames, right? I can clear those. Here, I'll just do it with a new thing. I'll say final frames. This is my full transformation. Mark that as green. And now I'm going to select all these from Downloads. Everything I brought in today. And just move those out of Downloads and into my final frames. And it didn't get them all, and that's okay. Because I can always